So we're going to go to that slide right there because this is what y'all were supposed to do. You were supposed to prove the following, the Battle of Gettysburg. And you will notice there are some lines there. Hopefully y'all actually wrote on your papers some things. I am actually going to write some things as well on those lines. I'm going to write the things that y'all come up with. So let's say I'm a skeptic. I don't believe there was ever a Battle of Gettysburg. Or I don't believe it was as big as they said. Or I don't believe that as many men died there as history books say. How would you go about proving to me as a skeptic that indeed the Battle of Gettysburg is what we typically know it from history? Raise your hand so that not everybody's talking. Let's come on, Bryant. Feeling better?
A little bit.
Okay. All right, Stacy, what do you got? One thing.
Photos by Matthew Brady.
Were those the
You
stage
take my
ones or the
answer.
non-stage ones? I'm sorry?
But he actually used daguerreotypes.
Okay? All right, I'm going to play devil's advocate. His photos were all after the battle.
When dead people were on the ground.
Okay. Or
They're bloated.
I mean, they're pretty graphic.
supposedly dead people on the ground.
Well,
I'm playing devil's advocate.
you need to look at those pictures.
Understand, Stacy, that when you deal with evidences like this, when you're looking at evidence for the Bible, evidence against evolution, evidence for the existence of God, people will make those objections. So all I'm doing is making potential objections here so that we're not the ones with the deer in the headlight look when what appears to us to be rock solid evidence doesn't necessarily appear to be rock solid evidence to others.
Well, interestingly enough, they have recently found a photo right before the Gettysburg Address occurred.
Okay?
And you can see Lincoln in it. They didn't know he was in it.
Okay. Which, of course, is, again, after the battle. So you're proving things after the fact. Okay. But that's a part of the evidence, too. I'm not gonna deny that. I'm just gonna remind that when you deal with photographic evidence can be...
Well, not back then as easily tampered with. But
Not as easily tampered with, but it is a well-established historical fact that Matthew Brady moved the bodies. There's a very famous picture from Gettysburg of a dead Confederate in the Devil's Den. And historians are in agreement that he was moved there. It makes a great picture, but it's not really where the guy died. Okay, but we got it up there. Photos, Matthew Brady. All right, who else had their hand up? What order? Jennifer did. Jennifer, what you got?
Just on the artifacts like bullets and cannons and
Artifacts, okay. All right, lots of artifacts, okay. You cannot dig for artifacts at Gettysburg National Military Park today. However, parts of the battlefield were not in the national park. I have a cannonball at home that was excavated from outside the bounds of the park. Now where it is within the park.
Can you prove that?
It is a Providence artifact. It is a Providence artifact.
That's because somebody said it was.
No, it's because a reputable dealer, okay, that's evidence. A reputable dealer Providence the artifact. And it matches ordnance that would have been found in that place. Okay, but artifacts, lots of artifacts. If you could go with a metal detector on the national park today, it would just be beeping constantly because of all the bullets and the shrapnel, belt buckles, and other things. They would actually probably find some. They would probably find some bodies as well. Every once in a while, on the battlefields, they find a body that was never buried. Well, it was buried, but not officially buried. Okay, so artifacts, good. Who else had their hand up? Tim.
That did, but it was that what you just got through saying. You stole my thunder. They found all sorts of lead, all over the.
I didn't steal your thunder. That's what Jennifer said. Artifacts.
Well, she did too. Yeah, but spectacles.
I'm going to give credit where credit's due.
Spectacles from way back when they found lots of different things.
Okay. All right. So lots of artifacts, and there are lots of artifacts in Gettysburg. Shelley.
Letters from the soldiers that were written during the war.
Okay, so can we call those eyewitness accounts?
Yeah, that's
I
what
think so.
You took your thunder.
You took my thunder.
Eyewitness accounts, very good. Okay,
How about the actual battlefield with the grave markers?
okay, battlefield itself. Grave markers, okay, those are in the National Cemetery. Where are all the Confederate graves, by the way? Anybody know?
In the south and at Hollywood Cemetery in
They are.
Virginia.
They're not buried on the battlefield. They're not allowed in the National Cemetery there because they were fighting against the United States. So those bodies were, at least the ones that were officially removed, were removed to the south. And a lot of northern graves were too. The families wanted them back in the family plot, so they were moved. All right, so the battlefield itself, graves. Sherry?
We visited the battlefield when my boys were real little,
Uh-huh.
and they were very disappointed that the bodies were still not there. They said, "Where are the bodies?" I said, "Well, they're buried. We're not going
Okay.
to see bodies."
Didn't see bodies.
But what evidence are you giving us here, Sherry? What evidence?
all the museum stuff and all the artifacts and everything.
Okay, so that goes back to Jennifer. All right, let's go Todd, and then we'll get up here to Tom.
It's just an update on the photos. With AI, a lot of things are in question online, but I did read an article that's saying AI has not perfected eyes, reflections in eyes. That's one way experts look at a photo to rule out AI.
Okay. I will say this because we've used AI. We use it for some of our VBS images. If an image appears too perfect, it probably is. It probably is AI. So, but the technology is getting really, really good. I have to actually check a box on our YouTube every time I upload a video saying that we did not use a character, having the character make statements that the character himself did not state. Basically, we're attesting to the fact that we did not use AI to produce what we produced. Yeah, that's a thing now.
AI can mimic voices very well. There's some videos of famous characters or famous politicians singing songs that they never sing, but it sounds like they sing them.
Okay.
It's just cool.
All right. So how about getting back to Gettysburg? What else we got? Tom.
How about the Lincoln Memorial with the Gettysburg Address inside? And with that video. Who else is going to build a huge memorial for the Gettysburg Address if there wasn't a battle of Gettysburg?
It's how much you want to prove, how much you got staked.
I mean, that's not a little bullet.
All right, let's say, I don't know, let's call that monuments because there are monuments all over the field.
Yeah, but there's only one in Washington, D.C., right? Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, but we'll just throw all that into monuments. Okay, Dad?
Well, I have military records of commanders.
Okay.
There's all kinds of historical documents.
So we have eyewitness accounts, but those are, I would say out here beside that, battle reports. There's something else here I'm waiting for someone to say about all these eyewitness accounts and battle reports. Brenda?
I wrote down the last name of a lot of people that fought at it.
The what?
Some of the men that fought there.
What about it?
I wrote down the last names of some of them.
Okay, all right, because we had muster rolls, okay, from the military records.
Lee and Hill, Hood, Leeds, Haskell. When I was reading about it, those names were listed as men that fought there. I didn't write the first name down, but I figured Hill last name.
Yeah, generals, commanders, okay. So what about these eyewitness accounts and battle reports?
There's newspaper articles that have Lincoln's address that still exists.
Okay, and there's newspaper articles that have accounts of the battle.
What about...
and they're not eyewitnesses, so they are different. They're second person, third person.
What about generational things? Grandkids of...
it's not direct testimony. Not direct testimony. Elizabeth?
Are you trying to get us to say maybe the eyewitness accounts reported different versions of the same story?
I'm not trying to get you to say that, but that's pretty good. Okay. So we're going to write out here beside that, eyewitness accounts differ from one another, and they do. Okay. A huge part of what historians of Gettysburg do is try to piece things back together based on the accounts. And I will tell you, sometimes they modify. If you went 50 years ago and toured the battlefield and heard a version of the story, if you went now, you might get a slightly different version of the story because there's been more historical research. But yes, that's true, and it's a great point, and we write it up there, but it's still not what I'm looking for.
Can you give us a hint?
You have accounts from both sides, not just the witness.
That's it. That's what I'm looking for. Eyewitness accounts from both sides. Okay? That's important because it wasn't Northern propaganda that talked about a battle at Gettysburg. It wasn't Southern propaganda. Both sides. People from both sides wrote about it, attested to it. Okay? The winning side and the losing side. Eyewitness accounts, you might throw in there the people that were actually on the battlefield while they were fighting. There were farms. Gettysburg, that area was a bunch of farms. There was the city of Gettysburg. And so there were civilians that gave accounts as well. There's a house in Gettysburg that still has a cannonball lodged in the wall. There are witness trees. What's a witness tree? Anyone know what a witness tree is? There was a tree that was there during the battle. And every time I had been there in the summertime. I've been there with Anna and with Adela and Sam. And it's always been in the summertime. And there's this beautiful oak tree that's a witness tree. And I have always wanted to get an acorn and bring it back and plant it. There are no acorns in the summer because the squirrels have eaten them all by then. And so
You'd be violating.
You'd be taking an artifact.
I'm not real sure taking an acorn, that's not an artifact, so I'm not sure that would be violating the law.
Flowers or anything like that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think I'd have to ask my tour guide about that and see what they said. They'd probably say, I honestly think they'd probably say the squirrels get enough food anyway, so don't worry about taking it.
They'd probably say I didn't see you.
They might say that as well, okay? But there's all these sorts of things, okay? Now, when you put all of that together, the preponderance of the evidence says what?
It happened.
It happened, okay? It happened. Are there some details that historians still argue about? Sure. Absolutely, and there always will be, okay? The heat of battle, what's going on, commanders don't always remember, eyewitnesses don't always remember, so we get differing accounts. But even with that, not just the basic facts. I mean, a lot of the facts are not in dispute at all for the Battle of Gettysburg. Okay? But notice, we did not say, get out a test tube. Notice, we did not say, do an experiment. All right? Now, I'm glad because somebody is skeptical of my cannonball. And now I'm going to talk, and I'm going to talk about my cannonball. I'm still right up there. I can't right up there. All right. I could have brought it, actually. Didn't think about that. Okay, so let's say I have a cannonball. Can I subject the cannonball to scientific tests to see whether it could come from that period and that place?
Yes.
Absolutely I could. All right? There are lots of fake artifacts out there.
But yours is real.
Mine is real, okay? Because the problem with Anna is she's convinced that cannonball killed somebody and she thinks it's got ghosts or something. And so she doesn't like my cannonball. There are whole books that have been written about Civil War ordnance. What is and what isn't. There are books that have been written as to how to tell the difference. Because if you find a round metal ball, does it have to be a cannonball?
No.
No, it could be a whole lot of things. It could be a very large ball bearing. And sometimes people who want to make money dishonestly will manufacture artifacts. This happens in biblical archaeology. When we get to biblical archaeology later in this class, we'll probably talk about it. Hang on a second there. Because you can manufacture artifacts. This particular artifact, one, the person that excavated it was reputable. The company selling it was reputable. Secondly, they weren't asking a whole lot of money for it. Third, it had all the hallmarks of the type of ordnance that would be found in the location it was found based on what batteries were located across the field. So it was a Confederate ball that landed where it landed on the field. Okay, and they know what guns they were firing because not all cannons fire the same ordnance, do they? They fire a whole lot of different things. But they can also test it. So, what's the composition of the metal? Does the metal correspond to that period? If it doesn't correspond to that period, then we reject it, don't we? As not a legitimate artifact. All right. So, if it's made out of titanium steel and it purports to be from 1863. Is it going to be rejected or accepted?
Rejected.
It's going to be rejected. Okay. What is the patina on it like? I really should have brought it. What is patina?
That like
Rust,
it's aging.
that kind of age.
It's all that stuff that things accumulate. Ladies, if you don't dust your house for about 5 years, your furniture is going to have a nice patina. Okay, because all sorts of things. Dust and skin cells and all sorts of gross stuff make a patina. Everything that's excavated out of the ground has a patina. And soil types are not the same all over the world. So when they excavate biblical artifacts, for example, they're interested in that patina. All right? If there's an inscription, is the inscription under the patina or is it through the patina? If it's under the patina, then that's at least an indication that it's legitimate. If it's inscribed through the patina, then what does that mean?
Somebody think the inscription maybe.
The inscription is faked, okay, because it was inscribed through the patina. Unless there's an old patina and a new patina. This gets really complex, doesn't it? How do you decide all of that? Using scientific experiments. But otherwise, all the kind of evidence we're looking at is that historical, legal, logical evidence. And when we talk about the existence of God, that's what evidence we're using, okay? So, let's finish that slide. And go to the next one. Woo, no. There we go. All right. So, Tim, you had a question earlier. I don't want to forget you, so go ahead and ask your question, unless you already forgot it.
No, it was just on your cannonball. I was wanting to know if you dusted it with DNA or not.
We did not dust it with DNA.
All right, just checking.
But I will tell you that when I got ready to bring that back on an airplane, I had to do a whole lot of checking whether I was going to have a problem with TSA. And in fact, they required me to open my suitcase. They wanted to know what that big metal ball was all about.
Oh yeah.
And once I showed them what it was fine. It could fly, but boy, they wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to go boom on the airplane. So, but no, we did not dust it for DNA. I suppose there'd be a lot of different DNA on it.
Yeah. Just wondering.
Because it was in a shop, so people were touching it. All right, Holocaust. Now, nobody denies the Battle of Gettysburg, at least not anybody I've ever met, but people do deny the Holocaust. Okay? Usually they're neo-Nazis, but they don't have to be, but they deny that the Holocaust happened. It was a Jewish conspiracy to win sympathy from the world community so that we could establish the state of Israel in 1948. People really say that. Okay? And they're serious about it. They're dead serious about it. So, what would we do to prove the Holocaust? Tim.
Again, I'm going to be the first one to throw something. There's 1 billion artifacts on the Holocaust.
Okay.
You know. And then...
no, you only get one. Artifacts. Okay, there are indeed billions of artifacts. Dad.
There are lots of accounts from survivors.
Okay, good. Survivor accounts. As we go through these, hands get fewer and fewer. Tom?
The Nazis were meticulous with their records of everything. How much gold they took, how much, every person there, so they kept meticulous. And that's what hung them, because they had meticulous records.
They did. They tried to destroy a lot of them. They were unsuccessful. Yeah. Stacy?
So, a legal one, the Nuremberg trials.
All right.
Yeah. Well, that was for all, was that for all crimes? The Nuremberg, was that for all war crimes or specific to?
It was all war crimes.
All war crimes.
But almost all of the war crimes that the Nazis committed had in some way or another some effect on the Holocaust.
Because you had Goering there and other people.
Okay, Jennifer?
I watched a documentary a while back on the Treblinka death camp, and they were actually finding like mass graves, and I think they found the foundation of gas chambers. So just the excavations that they're doing at these.
All right, we're going to write we're going to say sites. Okay? So how many of y'all how many of you have been to a concentration camp? Okay, several of y'all have been. I know my kids have been. I've been to Auschwitz 3 times. 3 times.
Been to Dachau and Auschwitz.
I'm sorry?
Been to Dachau and Auschwitz.
Okay, I've been to Dachau as well. All right. So you can go to these places, all right, and see them. There are several. I know my kids have gone because we made sure that they got to go see that. Wesley.
There's different companies that kind of, if you do like research over certain companies, like BMW or whatnot, you will see that they originate by selling certain things to the Nazis during the war and manufacturing most of their equipment.
Okay.
And the gas they manufactured. Cyclone B or whatever.
All right. What else we got? Jerry?
When Jerry was real young and first went in the military, he was stationed in Germany. He knew a man that had been in a concentration camp. He worked with him. And then later when we came, we did visit Dachau. So
Okay.
he actually knew a person that was...
So we'll say survivor accounts, eyewitnesses. Because there were the guards and the other people that worked in the camp as well. They were not survivors. Okay. Linda?
When they liberated the camps, they took pictures.
The military.
The military.
Okay. All right. Wesley?
Not all of them could be factual, but there are, I think, videos of him like speaking and
there are films. There are films.
Propaganda.
Okay. So photos. That was more. You don't have video. You don't have films from Gettysburg, but you do have films. Not many, but you do have some from the Holocaust. Okay? The Nazis weren't completely stupid. They didn't want too much evidence out there. They had to keep records because that's how they were, but they didn't want a whole lot of evidence that could come to light later. So, but there are some films. Yes, there are. Shelley?
He got films and photos.
Okay, films and photos. Okay. All right. So, Jennifer?
Would Anne Frank's diary, would that go under survivor accounts?
Yeah, we can throw it under there. Okay, nothing in the diary has anything to do with when she was in the camps, but it has to do with hiding. I mean, why are you hiding? Okay, there's a reason why you're hiding. So
there is another article I was telling them earlier that actually an eyewitness account of Anne Frank in the actual concentration camps. It's written out from her, witnessing Anne Frank and her sister and her mother while they were there, and what went on in the concentration camps with her, and how long she actually lasted, and how many days it was before.
Okay. All right. So those are eyewitness accounts as well. All right. But not her diary. Her diary stops when they're captured by the Nazis against Holland. All right. So lots of different evidence out there. Okay. Can some of this be faked?
Sure.
Absolutely, some of it can be faked. What happens when you have so much?
Hard to say what they're saying. Very
hard to say what they're saying. Something else that is not up here, but is indirect evidence. Okay, you go to any part of Europe, and if you look carefully enough, some of them are museums, but some of them are really not museums. They're synagogues, empty synagogues, synagogues in cities that have no Jewish population anymore. Little town of 5,000 near to where Yvonne and I lived actually had a Jewish synagogue on the square. It was not a fancy building, it was just a normal building, but that was a Jewish synagogue during the war. There are no Jews in that town anymore. Where'd they go? They didn't all go to Israel. Okay? That's right, they died. Okay? When you know pre-war population, Jewish population, and post-war Jewish population, you can do the math. And realize that a whole lot of people disappeared. Where did they go? That's circumstantial evidence, but when you combine it with all of the rest of this, it just weighs the evidence more heavily. Okay? But in spite of that, there are still people that deny what? They deny that it happened. They say it's all a conspiracy by the Jews. If that sounds familiar, it should. It's exactly what the Nazis said. The Jews are out to get us. All right? Stacy?
So some of them did flee. And they
Yes.
fled to Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, some of them go to Israel, some of them flee to the United States or to England.
Yeah, a lot survive.
Yeah.
Okay? Not many got to flee because not many countries would let them in, including ours. Okay? People were in denial that what Jews were saying was happening in Europe was happening. And it was happening, but a lot of countries wouldn't let them in. Dan and then Jennifer.
I'm reading a book right now where Roosevelt and even the generals, after the war was over with, refused to feed the survivors of these camps. And it took a couple of guys, Army guys, to bring that to light in the national press that forced them to feed these people and house them and take care of them because they were still behind barbed wire. We were not feeding them, taking care of them medically. And that's established fact.
And there might have been a lot of different reasons for that, okay? People who have been starving can't all of a sudden get a whole lot of food, now can they? But they should have been getting care. There was some other comments? Jennifer?
I just find it incredulous that there are actually people that believe that the Holocaust is just something that was made up. I was actually on the Smithsonian website, and they said that the Holocaust is like the best documented case of genocide. I mean, and there's just so much evidence and so much proof. I can't even wrap my mind around somebody saying that the Holocaust never happened.
But they do.
Denial.
Wesley?
Then you have like the indirect war, which like with Japan, like it doesn't correlate necessarily straight to this, but it plays into the same war, like the World War.
Well, that would be evidence for World War II. We were looking specifically for evidence for the Holocaust.
But the Holocaust would fall in evidence for World War II, so you could use that as...
Certainly in Europe, yep. Okay.
It's hard to believe that all took place for a lot of people, but when you stand in that camp and you look at the areas that I saw where they had the hair of the people that they shaved off their heads and all of their jewelry and all that kind of stuff, and there's suitcases with their names on it.
And there's videos of that too when they went in there. Americans went in there. There's videos of them, and stuff.
Well, see, the cases of baby shoes are pretty good.
Yeah.
We've been there, Dad and I have been to Auschwitz. So.
Washington, D.C., they have a massive three-story building of the Holocaust.
In the Holocaust Museum.
Yeah, it's huge. It takes a while to go through it. Right. Yeah.
Okay, so these again are all things that are historical, legal, logical evidence. When we talk about evidence for God, that's the type of evidence we're looking at. We're not looking for scientific evidence. You cannot put God in a test tube. Okay? You cannot subject God to a chemical analysis. You're looking for basically evidence that is, I don't want to say indirect. It's not indirect, but it's not direct evidence. It's not, you can't touch God. You can't see God. You can't hear God. You can't smell God, okay, the senses. So you're dealing with a different kind of evidence in this kind of a set of circumstances, okay? So I wanted to go through all of that because I want us to think about these things. I want us to understand how this works because we talk about the evidence for God and we talk about one big piece of the evidence for God. We're looking at this kind of evidence, okay? But even with this kind of evidence, people can and do deny what the evidence is saying. Okay, so even with all of this abundance of evidence, there are people that, and they are serious. They're not just denying the Holocaust because it makes them, it plays into their political agenda or whatever. They've convinced themselves, or they've been convinced that in fact the Holocaust was not real. So it's not always dishonesty. Okay, sometimes people deny the evidence. And it's not that they're being dishonest about it, it's just that they're not convinced or they've been convinced of something else. So we should be prepared for that as well when we discuss with people about the evidence for God. Alright, so, Stacy?
So I have one question.
Okay.
So when I was in Austria and when I was in Belgium, that I encountered people that would talk about World War II and remove Jews and the Holocaust from the conversation entirely. It was like it didn't happen because they aren't talking. You know what I'm saying? Did you find that? I mean, because I would think.
Well, I lived in the Czech Republic. They didn't deny the Holocaust. They knew what it was like to live under Nazi terror.
Well, and in fact, this one guy that was our tour guide said, we liked being under Nazi rule because they were nice to us. You know.
Who said that?
This tour guide that we were listening to. It was like.
In what country?
In Belgium.
Was he there?
His grandfather, that was his grandfather's testimony about them being in Belgium, was that he liked it because they were very nice to him. They played with him and gave him toys and stuff like that.
Childhood memory.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I found that very interesting. It happened in Austria too. He was like the tour guide also there didn't even want to talk about it. By not talking about it, it makes it not something maybe that didn't happen. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
it's a dark subject.
It's there has been since the end of World War II an attempt by a lot of people to say that wasn't us. That was the Nazis. They did that. We didn't do that. The Nazis did that. The problem with that is it wasn't just SS units that were slaughtering people. It wasn't just SS units that were lining Jewish women and children, and Polish women and children, and Czech women and children in front of mass graves and shooting them. It was the normal German soldiers who had cameras and were taking pictures, and they were sending the film back to their families to develop. So their families knew what was going on, and certainly on the Eastern Front as well. The Nazis built the death camps were not like 100 miles from the nearest town. You go to Auschwitz today, Auschwitz is a bustling little Polish city with a shopping mall. A very surreal experience. Last time I was in Auschwitz, the Polish town, with my family and with another family from church. When we got to town, we went to the shopping mall and ate Kentucky Fried Chicken for our dinner. It's very surreal that you're in a city that right next to the city is the death camp, or what's left of the death camp, and here's a whole bunch of people that are just living their normal lives. And there were people there that were living their normal lives because they were serving, not willingly, they were being made to serve the camp and in whatever capacity the Germans wanted to use them in. But everybody at the end of World War II, the Germans and the Austrians all wanted to deny this. The reality is a whole lot more Germans and Austrians knew what was going on and said nothing. And the problem also becomes is that there were a lot of other European countries where there was a lot of anti-Semitism as well, and didn't necessarily bother those folks a whole lot when the Jews started disappearing. That's just reality of the time, and maybe it goes with what Dad's reading in that book, that there were even American military leaders that didn't really care too much to help these folks.
The reason why I mention that, though, is that we will talk about that, about people moving away from recognizing God. It's the same sort of mental approach to one of the reasons why people refuse to worship God.
Okay. You mean
That's
from the standpoint of not talking about Him?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, people who don't believe in God don't talk about Him, and the longer you don't talk about Him, the less you believe in Him.
So that's the reason why.
Yeah, and there's definitely, yeah. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and what little time we've got. We've not a little time, we've got a little bit of time. Let's go ahead and start talking about the evidence for God's existence. So I'm going to suggest to you that there are 4 lines of historical, legal, logical evidence. Okay? 4. All right? If I were going to test you, this would be a test question. Multiple choice. Circle the one that is not a line of historical, legal, logical arguments for the existence of God. One of those is the cosmological argument. Another of those is the teleological argument. Then we have the moral argument. And then finally, our 4th line of evidence as has anyone seen God? Now, looking at this, I will tell you, we're going to explain what each one of these is, okay? So if you're looking at that and saying, what in the world is a cosmological argument? That's okay. We're going to come up with a term that'll be easier to remember. What is the teleological argument? That has nothing to do with T. Okay, has nothing to do with T at all. We'll talk about what that is. The moral argument, that's pretty straightforward. And then finally, our last argument, has anyone seen God? That gets its own class entirely, its own topic. Okay, you don't have those materials just yet. I will also say this, and then maybe in my notes here in just a minute, that you may not find all of these arguments equally convincing. That's okay. What I think is important to remember is God has left us 4. So if you go through these 4, and for whatever reason you come to the moral argument and you say, I don't see it. Stephen didn't do a good job of explaining it, and I may not, all right? Stephen didn't explain it well. I don't see it. Nah, that's not for me evidence. That's okay, because you still got the cosmological, the teleological, and then the fourth one there, has anyone seen God? Okay. If you come away from all 4 of these without seeing a convincing reason to believe in God, then we need to have a talk. Okay? Couple of these are really straight out of Scripture. Okay? And so if you don't see those are definitely something we need to have a talk about. But you may find that some are more convincing than others. That's perfectly all right. There's nothing wrong with that. So if I explain the cosmological argument, you say, I'm not buying that one. But you buy the theological argument, good. All right? God has left us ample evidence for his existence. Okay, so proof number 1, or line of evidence number 1 for the existence of God is what's called the cosmological argument. If cosmological is difficult to remember what that's about, remember cause and effect. Just remember cause and effect. Okay? If you remember that, you'll remember what this argument is. Basically, there can be no effect without a cause, and the first cause, the uncaused cause, is God. Look in your Bibles in Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 4. Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 4. Here the writer says, for every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. That is, in effect, the cosmological argument. That is the argument for cause and effect. Every house has a builder, and the builder of everything or of all things is who? God. Who built God? No one built God. Okay? He is the uncaused cause. Okay? And we understand this, don't we? If the person behind you tonight slams into your rear end, you know exactly what happened, right? He didn't stop. Then you have to ask why he didn't stop. Maybe he didn't hit his brakes. Maybe he hit his brakes and they failed. Maybe he hit his brakes and his wife wanted to get rid of him, so she cut the brake lines. Okay? Those are all possibilities, are they not? One is an accident. The other is an accident by mechanical failure, and the third would be a crime, murder. Someone dies. Okay, all right. There's all different potential causes, but ultimately you can narrow it down to one thing: the cause that you now have a busted up rear end and whiplash is the guy behind you didn't stop. Okay, every cause, every effect has a cause. All right. So, maybe, what happens in a chain reaction accident? Dad's driving along the road, the car in front of him slams on its brakes because a cat ran out in front of it.
Well, it says, how come you're ready to run over the cat?
Well, that's what I would say, but we're on video, so. So the car slams on its brakes. Dad, because he doesn't react in time, slams into that car. And what happens down the line? Now, everybody else's reaction time gets less and less, right? And so everybody's running at each other. And the 18-wheeler, 5 cars back, he's busy looking at his phone. And he plows into everybody. So you have a chain reaction accident. You have a whole series of effects that have a cause. And you can go back even farther. Why was the cat in the road? Because somebody accidentally let him out of the house. I don't know. Okay? So you can find all these causes and effects. Every effect has a cause. We understand this. Okay? We understand this. It's almost axiomatic. We almost don't have to explain it. It's so obvious that everything that happens is caused by something. Except for God. God is the uncaused cause. There is no cause of God. There is no origin of God. All right? Paul Little says this. He says, we as human beings and the universe itself are effects which must have had a cause. We come eventually to an uncaused cause, who is God. There are only three ways that the existence of the universe, the cosmos, hence cosmological, see how we get the name, can be accounted for.
Who's Paul Little?
He wrote a book. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I think it's the book he wrote. Okay? Three ways. Only three ways that the existence of the universe can be accounted for. One, it is eternal. The cosmos has always existed. Two, it created itself. Three, it was created. There is no other possibility. None. Okay? It is either eternal, it has always existed, it had no beginning, or it created itself, or it was created by something external to it. Okay? So, looking at these, we're going to give a comparison. I know you already have the paper, so you already see what's coming up. This car is eternal. It has always existed. How many of you drive a car that has always existed?
It's pretty old.
It might be pretty old, but it's not always existed. It has a year. I drive a 2022 Kia. Okay? We identify cars by their years, don't we? You call your insurance wants to know what year is your car. They can pull it up in the VIN number. They put the VIN number, they know everything about your car. Every car has a year. If I called State Farm tomorrow and said, I want to insure my new vehicle, what year was it manufactured? I don't know. It has just always existed. I'm not sure how State Farm would react to that. They might think I was pulling their leg. But we understand that. Nobody says that. This car is eternal. How about this car created itself? Boy, wouldn't we like to have a car like that?
AI.
I mean, it'd be great to have a car that just creates itself. You go out in the morning, and there on the driveway is a brand new car. It just showed up. No paperwork, nothing. Keys in it. It's got a full tank of gas. Ready to go. Wouldn't that be great? This car created itself. We know better than that. We know that doesn't happen. Okay? Or, this car was manufactured. When it comes to cars, we all know that, don't we? When you look at a new car, if it's an imported model, it tells you where it came in. It came in Laredo, or it came in California. All right? If it is manufactured here in the States, it'll be stated somewhere in the documentation where the car was manufactured, who manufactured it. All right? We're used to that. Nobody calls State Farm and says, I've got a new car. What kind of car is it? It's eternal. Or it was manufactured, but I don't know by whom. The little car elves did it overnight on the driveway. Nobody does that. Okay? But when it comes to the cosmos, those are our only three possibilities. It is either eternal, it created itself, or it was created. Let's look a little bit farther. It's only our first bell. Right? So it is eternal. The problem with the idea of it being eternal is we have the second law of thermodynamics, which one says what? Anybody heard it?
Go from higher order
to chaos. Okay? Everything eventually winds down to nothing. Right? So if the cosmos was eternal, it has always existed, it shouldn't exist now. Or we shouldn't have any usable energy. We have plenty of usable energy, don't we? The sun makes the grass grow. The cows eat the grass. We eat the cows. And sometimes the grass as well. Right? So there's still lots of usable energy. So the idea of the universe being eternal is contradicted by the second, and I point this out, law of thermodynamics. It's a scientific law. There's so much certainty about that it is not called a theory. No one thinks of it as a theory. No serious physicist would ever do what? Question the second law of thermodynamics. Okay? What about it created itself? Well, there's an old saying that from nothing, nothing comes. Right? Something has to come from something else. The universe could not have created itself Because it wasn't in existence. In order for it to create itself, it would have had to be eternal, but if it's eternal, then it didn't create it. See the problem? So what do you have to have? Well, you have to have our third option, which is it was created. In which case the creator must be outside the material universe. Must be. He cannot be a part of the material universe because if he is, it created itself. And we know it can't be eternal. So the cosmological argument says God is the uncaused cause. He has no cause of himself. He is self-existent. He exists in and of himself. Okay? And because he's outside the material universe, he could do what?
Create.
He could create it. So Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1 says what?
In the beginning.
In the beginning God
Created.
created the heavens and the earth. When I say this is a biblical argument, it is. It's a biblical argument straight out of Genesis 1:1. Okay? That's what Genesis 1:1 says. It says God created the universe.
Question. Just for my knowledge only. Who created the second law of thermonucleus?
Thermodynamics.
Excuse me.
Thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Who created it?
Yeah.
God created it.
Okay.
Just like God created gravity and all the natural laws that govern the natural universe that he created. Man discovered it, but God created it. That's like who discovered the New World? Well, Columbus or Erickson, one or the other, right? And maybe a whole bunch of those Native Americans that crossed that land bridge, they would probably say they discovered it.
Yeah.
And they'd probably be right. Okay? Who created it? God did. What if no one was living in the New World? What if there were no Native Americans in the New World? Did it still exist?
Yes.
Of course it did. Okay? That's like the question. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is there, does it still make a sound?
Yes.
Well, yes, it does. Okay, because sound is just the movement of waves, air waves, and shock waves. There may not be anybody hear it, but it still makes a noise. Okay? So God creates the second law of thermodynamics. And by the way, let me just say this: God is the God of order, not of chaos. He creates natural laws in which we can exist and live. And we should be very glad about that. It is unfortunate if I happen to be walking on the roof of my house at night and I slip and I fall and I break my neck. That is unfortunate. It's an unfortunate working of natural laws that otherwise keep us from floating off into space. We live in an ordered universe. And because we have a creator that created an ordered universe. All right? Any questions about that slide before I pull up the next one? All right, so the cosmological argument. God, by definition, is eternal and uncreated. Exodus 3, verse 14, you know this verse. I am who I am. The I am has sent you to them. I'm speaking to Moses. Okay? Eternally existent. Hang with me for just a second. God is spirit, not material. John chapter 4 and verse 24. Hence, A.J. Hoover writes in his book, hence to ask who made God would be like asking who made this unmakeable being. To ask who made a necessary entity is to talk nonsense. All right, so proof number 2, we start with Sunday morning, the teleological argument. All right, so go through those papers. If you see any questions or comments as you're going through them, write them down. We'll talk about them together in class. Thank you all.